Hey Red Rocks Brussels, as we continue our devotional talks about trusting in God, I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about trusting in prayer. A few days ago, there was a family member of mine who had a newborn, and the newborn was so cute and cuddly in the crib that the mother decided to crawl in the crib with the newborn. And it was a fairly large crib, so she thought this wouldn't damage anything. And as she was sitting there playing with the child, all of a sudden I heard a loud clap, and the crib suddenly broke. The child was okay, thankfully, and so was the mother. But nevertheless, 30 seconds later, as she grabbed the child, she went later to her own bedroom and sat on her bed with no problem, no second guessing or anything like that. Even though the bed had broke for the child, she took the child and went and sat on her own bed and didn't think twice about it. Now, when it comes to trusting, obviously we should have firm beds, we should trust whenever we go down to sleep, that's a given. But when it comes to prayer, a lot of prayers originally may not be answered, or perhaps you got the answer that you weren't looking for when you originally started praying. Many people, when they get an answer that they're not hoping for, or when they don't get an answer at all, they say to themselves, prayer doesn't work, prayer is useless, I'm not going to trust in it anymore. And that's sadly the case for many Christians today, but it should not be our case. In fact, there's a story in Acts chapter 12 about the early church, and it was a tough time for the early church. In chapter 12 of Acts, Luke records that one of the church leaders, James, had been put to death by the king during this time. And yet a few verses later, it says that the king also was going to put Peter to death. Now, the church in this situation can say to themselves, well, the king killed James, so he's going to kill Peter, so there's no point in praying. But that's not what happens. In Acts 12, verse 5, Luke records that the church gathered together and they prayed for Peter. And miraculously, Peter was set free from prison. So even though prayer may have not worked for the leadership of James, it did work for Peter. And so while my family member did have a collapse in the baby crib, she nevertheless still had confidence in taking the child to her own bed and was able to continue with her life. So I don't know what prayers you have stopped praying because things haven't happened the way that you thought they would, but I want to encourage you, trust the power of prayer, trust the power of God. Maybe you need to resurrect some prayers in your life. I want you to take today and to consider that. Maybe pray some prayers that you once prayed as a child, that you once prayed as a teenager, and just know that the God that is powerful enough to resurrect and the God that is powerful enough to free Peter, he is also powerful enough to change your life through your prayers regardless of what has happened in the past. I pray that this encourages you today.